Marhaba, and welcome to the Matrix Green Pill, where real people connect.
Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm Hilmarie Hutchison, CEO of Matrix Public Relations, and today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Namita. Welcome, Namita, and how are you today?
Hey, Hilmarie, I'm fine, thank you. So today we are very excited to introduce you to Natalie Banks, who's a journalist, a marine conservationist, and the founder of Azraq, which is a not-for-profit organization focusing on marine conservation here in the UAE.
That is a fantastic and a very important cause. I'm so excited to be talking with Natalie today. Natalie, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on.
So Natalie, can you please tell our audience a little bit about you and your background?
Yes, so as was mentioned earlier, I am a journalist by qualification. I am also a scuba diving instructor, and so that's a way that I found my passion towards marine conservation. And I decided to move over from the journalism and media advising side of my life into dedicating my work to protecting and conserving marine environments for future generations.
That's fantastic. So you've mentioned that you were working as a journalist, and I know you were in journalism and media advisory for like 20 years, and you certainly have an impressive portfolio. But can you tell us about that background and how you ended up working in not-for-profit?
Absolutely. So I qualified as a journalist through university, going to university, and my first role was actually picked up to be a radio journalist back in 1990s, mid-1990s, very different to how it is now. But they used to actually have radio journalists to begin with. The industry was changing, and radio journalists are now like dinosaurs, and the producers and the radio presenters themselves undertake usually their own scripting and writing of news stories these days. So that left me in a bit of a quandary, and I went back to university. I did a year to finalise print journalism, and was working as a freelance journalist for quite some time before going into being a media advisor for many years for the Australian government. That took me for about 15 years of my life. I was dedicated to that type of role. And towards the end of my media advisory position, I came across a policy which was for shark culling, which is to try and reduce the amount of shark bites in the state I was living in Western Australia. And it was a policy that my government had introduced, and it was the first time I found myself opposed to the government policies, and I felt as though I couldn't just sit on my laurels, and I had to do something, and the rest is history. Decided to undertake a very aggressive campaign against this policy, and I gave up my job to follow this passion, and now I am a marine conservationist as a result.
Wow, what a brave stance to take.
Yes. So, Natalie, you mentioned you were a scuba diving instructor. So that's really wonderful. And that must have really brought you closer to the understanding of the marine life. Is that how your passion developed for marine life?
Absolutely. I was very fortunate becoming a scuba diver. My very second open water dive was actually with a whale shark. It was unpredicted. We didn't expect it to be there. Yeah, so and as I actually was finishing the dive and we were ascending as a group where we saw this shadow above us, and we were diving in Western Australia, and the first thought is shark, obviously, and we were quite concerned for a little while because there was quite a large shadow above us. And then we saw our boat crew jumping in, so kitting up and jumping in as quickly as possible, and we knew straight away it wasn't going to be a bad shark. And as we were ascending closer, we realised we were with a juvenile whale shark. And so I know people who have dived 650 plus dives and have never seen a whale shark in their life. And here I was still training to be a diver. and experiencing this wonderful, amazing, just jaw-dropping moment. And it was from that moment on that I knew I wanted to do something to conserve and protect the marine environment. And I went on to become a scuba diving instructor. I have specialised in marine debris, diving against debris, so picking up litter off the sea floor, and also in shark conservation. And so, it was just a natural progression really to get into a role that now where I'm full-time working towards protecting and conserving the marine environment.
Wow, that's quite an adventure. So, so could you just tell us more about how this whole thing happened? Like you became a shark spokesperson and all. How did it all happen?
Sure. So as I was saying before, we were talking about a policy that the government at the time had introduced in 2013, 2014. And it was a raw feeling that I was just adamantly opposed to this policy. For a scuba diver, one of the most amazing adventures you can do is actually scuba dive with sharks. Obviously, when you intend to do it. The diving when you don't intend to see sharks is a little bit more scarier, but when you do intend to see them, and they can be such majestic creatures to dive with, my intuition was basically saying that this policy was wrong, that it felt instinctively wrong to kill sharks as a way of protecting beach users.
Right.
I just felt that there must be a better solution. And the more I delved into the topic, the more I started to realize history was also showing us that they had undertaken an exercise over 14 years in Hawaii to cull sharks as a way of protecting people from tiger sharks in Hawaii. And over that period, there had been no reduction in shark bites at all. And the reality is that shark bites are so rare that to get a reduction is actually very, very hard. And so there was no proof or evidence that killing sharks was actually going to reduce the shark bites in Western Australia. And the more I started to research it, the more I started talking to other people about it, and the more I started to realize there also was a huge scientific community that also supported my instincts. And that's what then led me, despite trying to get meetings with my colleagues, because I worked for the party that introduced this policy. I was not able to get a seat at any table. And so I thought that the only way that really I can get my voice heard and the voices of these sharks that cannot speak heard is to protest. And we held a protest that attracted, or rally that attracted, over around 5,000 people in the Premier of Western Australia's seat.
Amazing.
Along the beach.
Really, yeah.
And that's what kickstarted it all. We did it again and again until we actually got heard and we won the campaign. There is now no static drum lines in Western Australia as a way to kill sharks to protect beach users.
Wow, what an amazing achievement. You fought hard for that, but what an outcome.
We absolutely did. Thank you so much. Yeah, so there's still more to do. Unfortunately, there's shark culling on the east coast of Australia in New South Wales and Queensland, and that's what I was working on when my husband dragged me kicking and screaming to the UAE.
Oh, wow. Okay. We'll get a little bit more into that as well. So let's tackle the hard truth of what is happening to our oceans due to human pollution. So from your experience, can you share with us what is happening to our marine life?
Absolutely. So as I was saying before, I started learning to dive in 2008. And as a beginner diver, you are very much wowed for the first couple of dives as to the natural environment. I would say it probably took me about 4 years to start seeing an impact in the dives after becoming an instructor and diving a lot more frequently, where I started to realize that I could no longer dive without seeing pollution in the water, whether that be marine debris or whether that be contaminants. And it really impacted me in the fact that I had started my journey being a shark conservationist, and then I started really becoming a marine conservationist because of the fact of this very topic of marine debris. It took me on a journey, as I said, to where I am today, because when we are diving now, the amounts of debris that we're seeing is absolutely shocking, and the impacts that this is having on the marine environment when you delve into the information, But not just that, seeing marine life entangled or impacted by this debris is absolutely heartbreaking. We are basically visitors to their home, and we've trashed it completely.
Okay, so after such an incredible life in Australia and all the amazing work you did there, you moved here to the UAE. What inspired this move to the Middle East?
So it was definitely my husband's choice. It wasn't mine. I actually, it took me 3 months to make the final decision to come to the UAE, and it was actually due to bad health that made the decision for me. So my husband was due to fly to Dubai, and I was going into hospital at the same time. And as fate would have it, my husband was able to visit me and postpone his trip. And basically our discussion not long after his visit was, Nat, if I was in Dubai, it would take me days to get to you, not just hours. And you know, this is something that you need to think about. And by the end of the day, the very next day, I'd made my decision, and the very next day I called my boss at the time and said, sadly, I have made the decision to follow my husband to Dubai. And the rest is history. I do not look back. I have only looked forward, and it's with great delight that I can say that I'm very proud of the things that have been achieved in the time that I've been here since I took that decision, and no regrets.
That's fantastic. And that leads us right into talking about the wonderful organization that you founded called Azraq, which I know means blue in Arabic, a very
That's
clever
right,
name.
yes.
So for those who might not know about it, could you tell us about Azraq?
Absolutely. Azraq is a registered not-for-profit. We are a volunteer-based organisation focused on conserving and protecting the marine environment. And we do that through a range of activities that are set to educate, motivate and activate our community to care and to do something other than what they've probably been doing to this point. And so we do that through school presentations, corporate talks, movie screenings, eco-friendly merchandise that we have at stalls and at pop-ups throughout the UAE. We activate. So we have things like beach cleanups and ocean cleanups, mangrove tree planting days that we do in Ajman, and coral reef monitoring and surveys. So we like to get our team, but also to do that with corporates as well, and do some team building exercises with them that help the environment.
That is fantastic.
That sounds good, yeah.
And you have an incredible variety of outreach programs, as you've just mentioned. So what is it that you hope to achieve with Azraq?
So I guess our mission is what we're looking to achieve. So that's the education and awareness component. If we start with that, we want to, obviously, you can't see change occur unless you know that there's a reason for change to begin with. When we talk about education, a lot of people sort of don't realize how important it is, and even how time consuming it can be to try and raise awareness of the issue to begin with. I mean, there's so many 20-second bits or bytes that people can only take into their minds. And so often we need to repeat the message a number of times before we are able to be heard with all of the messages that people are getting left, right and center in their daily lives. So, and to be honest with you, we need to, when we're talking about marine conservation, I know this in and out because I've been my life in and out for the past 7 years and longer, even when I was a scuba diver. But, there's so many priorities and competing priorities for people. They become parents and their child will take a lot of their time. But we're talking about not just the protection of oceans, we're talking about the protection of humanity. And this is why I feel it's really important to do what we do, because we're looking at conserving people and protecting people when we talk about marine conservation. And I just want to take a moment of your time to reinforce this message, because it's a very important one. Every second breath that humanity takes, that humans take, comes from our oceans. And if we don't do more to protect them, we are impacting humanity's ability to live a life that is as we now know it. And our time is running thin. We are getting to a point where it's no longer going to be easy for us to fix some of the issues that our oceans are facing. And it becomes a life and death decision now for people to realize that our oceans are dying. And if they are dying, so is humanity's chances of surviving.
Wow,
Right.
what an important message that is to get out. And I know it must be far more difficult for you to gain awareness because the issues related to marine life is not as visible to the community as the pollution that they might see around them. So
Absolutely. We're talking about what happens underneath waves. And unless you have the opportunity to get underneath those waves, then you haven't built a connection. And this is where we've got an issue. And also too, when you're talking about the difficulties in raising awareness, we're a not-for-profit that is only 3 years young. We don't have a lot of money to be able to spend on advertising about what the problems are for people to see what these issues are. So we have to do it on a very tight budget. And so we don't get the spread that that other messages are getting out there, such as like the impacts on cancer and a lot of medical issues, humanitarian issues that get a lot of limelight. And so, you know, I don't have any ill will towards that. It just makes our job a little bit harder, but also more challenging. And I love that aspect of what I do.
Absolutely.
I love a challenge.
Sure. I can hear that. You've taken on a few of them already.
Amazing. Okay. So, Natalie, there are a lot of non-profit organizations already. What would you say is
Yes.
unique about Azraq?
So Azraq is exclusively UAE based and also to exclusively only on marine conservation issues. So when you look at that, there's actually not very many not-for-profits that are focused on this particular space. We also are, as far as I'm aware, the only entity that is actually involved in shark conservation, which is my as you now know, my passion. And so when we talk about protecting oceans, our sharks are a keystone species. So a lot of people have a lot of fear around sharks. But again, when it comes to what we do, when people are educated about the importance of the role that sharks play, then we are more of a desire to want to protect them, but also to respect them. So replace the fear with respect. A healthy amount of respect is probably what's needed for sharks.
Yes,
Right.
that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how do you decide, Natalie, which brands or organizations to partner with?
This one's a really easy one, although it takes a bit of time on our end. We like to, meet with the founder or the CEO, the person that's steering the organization to begin with. I understand that they are trying to do all that they can to have a minimal impact on the environment as much as possible. If they're willing to partner with a entity like ours, then they, one, obviously must have an interest in the marine environment and conservation, but two, we want to ensure that they're not greenwashing. And a lot of the times people don't even realize that may be something that's happening in their organization. A lot of the time they feel like they're doing something that is good for the environment, and when we actually are able to demonstrate the fact that they're actually harming the environment more by undertaking the activities that they're doing, we then leave it up to that organization to decide whether or not they want to put a different change in their operations to resolve that. So I'll give you a really good example of this if we have time.
Absolutely.
Of course,
go for
please.
A lot of people will look at a potential of recycling bottles, plastic water bottles into t-shirts as a very good thing to do. Right. And in on itself, when you just say those couple of words, absolutely, it sounds like a brilliant idea.
Yeah, sounds
but
like
when
a
we
good idea.
Absolutely. But when we talk to people who do this as part of their sustainability operations, they usually come to us with a lot of pride saying that this is what they do and that they're very sustainable. And so what they don't realize though is that polyester and plastic that are in clothing shreds off clothes when you wash them, and they shred off what's called microplastics and microfibers. And our washing machines and the technology in our washing machines is not good enough to actually filter out these microfibers, these plastic microfibers. So they go into the grey water and then go into the sewage plants. They go through another filtration system. And again, the microplastics are not filtered out. And through the grey water, they go straight into our oceans. And one of the biggest issues that we have in our oceans at the moment is microplastics.
Oh, wow.
So, and when we talk about microplastics, if you're a seafood lover or you are eating fish, which is very good, obviously omega-3 is very important, then your fish are consuming these microplastics. The larger fish like your tuna are also then consuming the smaller fish. And on average, we're consuming a credit card's weight of microplastics every month.
God.
That is crazy. So we end up eating plastic without even realizing
Absolutely.
it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And so then again, we're talking about human health. We're talking about the impacts to humanity.
Right.
Because chemicals in plastics have been proven to have harmful impacts on humans.
Sure.
Right.
So we're talking about development issues. We're talking about even as like issues with skin, because some people can't even wear the polyester, for example. They have a reaction to it. We're talking about cancers, all sorts of things that have been developed in humans as a result of impacts with plastic and the chemicals that plastics attracts. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? If microplastics are coming from our washing machines is the problem, what's the solution? Well, we're very fortunate in the fact that there are a couple of companies that have developed things like washing bags that will filter the microplastics, or what's called a Cora ball, C-O-R-A, Cora ball, and they will actually capture those microplastics and they go into the bin rather than going into the ocean. It's not perfect, but it's better. So if a company is willing to be transparent and say, we are recycling bottles and making products out of these recycled bottles, and we're allowing you to actually purchase something to trap those microplastics, why would they, if it doesn't impact their operations, why wouldn't they promote these potential products that actually trap and capture these microplastics? And so if an organization comes to us and says we're sustainable, we use recycled plastics in our clothes, and we give them the problem and they then walk away, that's their decision. But if they come back and they go, oh, we're willing to actually promote this and raise awareness of this, and also raise awareness of the fact that there's duppy bags and washing bags and Cora balls to collect these microplastics, and we want to promote those, then obviously that's an organization that's taken that extra step, and Azraq will want to partner with them.
That's brilliant. So, and if the more people and the more organizations that take, even if they are small steps, all of that works together to have less of an impact on the ocean, on marine life, and then in the end on human life.
Exactly.
So as you said, it's education that's the cornerstone of all of this, so people understand the impact that they are having, even their good intentions.
Yes, and corporates are willing to do. There are very good intentions many times in corporates. It's unfortunate that a lot of the times people aren't aware. And so this is exactly what you just said. The awareness is so important around what Azraq does.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you did mention that Azraq is a 3-year young organization. So what challenges have you faced when you were setting up Azraq?
A lot. To begin with, I didn't even know where to go to register a not-for-profit. I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know where. I basically came to Dubai not having a network of people that I could rely on or I knew here. I just knew I had this passion. Absolutely. WASTA and knowing and having a strong network is something I wish I had back at the time, but unfortunately being a new person to the country, I hadn't established that. But you know, where there's a challenge, there's me raising to it, and we love a challenge. I was able to speak to a variety of people that just from cold calling, and every now and then the same organization would pop up, and so I was like, okay, I obviously need to speak to this organization, and lo and behold, they were the ones that we needed to register with. Once we got through that process, it was an ever-changing landscape. policies and changes. A not-for-profit is still quite new concept in Dubai. We are the 83rd not-for-profit registered with the Community Development Authority in the country throughout its 49-year history.
Wow.
So it's not huge. Where in Australia, which is where I'm from, they have thousands, tens of thousands of not-for-profits registered in Australia. So they are also developing new policies and changes that we need to be flexible to accommodate. And so it was understanding when we got our permit in September, in October there was a brand new change. So they introduced the requirement to have 2 locals on a board, which we obviously needed to accommodate for, and a couple of other changes as well that took place. So it's that ever-changing landscape that we need to be flexible with. But we feel as though we've got it okay now. It's probably the first 12 months were very bumpy.
Sure, a big learning curve.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So Natalie, we watched your video with Lush Cosmetics in which you spoke a lot about plastic being the main culprit in your beach cleanups. Could you paint us the picture of what this looks like and what is its impact on marine life?
Yes, absolutely. There is without a doubt a big need to reduce single-use plastic consumption. They are the main things when we go and do a beach cleanup, when we look at what is being collected, the main things that we collect are single-use plastic items. And when I say about single-use plastic items, I mean the basics that most people already are aware of, but some aren't doing anything about. The plastic bags, the plastic bottles, the caps that go onto the bottles, the takeaway containers and the like. But up until recently, the number one item that we used to find regularly, without a doubt, at any cleanup, urban or beach, would be cigarette butts. And most people don't even realise that filters, yes, they're made out of cellulose acetate, a type of plastic that takes decades to actually break down. When we talk about cigarette butts and its impact on the environment, we're talking about things like arsenic and nicotine and lead, all seeping into the marine environment or into the land and having an impact on our land where we obviously grow our food, and on the marine environment, which is where in the UAE, we absolutely get our drinking water from our oceans, which is desalinated or flown in, which is always going to have an impact on the environment. So if we're relying on our water to come from the oceans, we're putting lead and arsenic and all those horrible things into our oceans from our cigarette butts. So our cigarette butt campaign was one of the ones where we spent some time raising awareness about this issue. This has now become the second most popular item that we find along any cleanup now. It's been replaced by PPE due to COVID-19, face masks, disposable face masks, and takeaway plastic containers are now what we're finding most in our cleanups. And that's purely, I believe, well, obviously the masks are, but the takeaway containers I also believe are from the COVID-19 and the reliance now on takeaway foods, because we are now eating mainly more at home than what we used to.
That is absolutely astounding and terrifying to think that cigarette butts, there's so many, and the impact, all those poisons going into the ground and into the water, that is terrifying.
Yeah. It's absolutely terrifying. And again, when you're talking about animals eat this stuff, they think that it's food, and so they are consuming it. And again, if we're looking at consuming those fish, we are eating plastic. We're eating all the chemicals that plastics are tracked and also are made from. The fossil fuel industry that plastics rely on to be made. Plastic is a chemical, and we're putting it all straight into our bodies. So this is where I want to come back to that very important point that I made. It's not just about oceans we're protecting. We want to protect people too.
Right.
At the very end, it comes back to humans and the impact it has on humans.
Yeah.
So speaking of the beach cleanups that you have, how often do you have them, and how would one be able to participate in one of these?
So We were doing about 2 on average every month. They are very time consuming to actually organize. A lot of people think, particularly if we're talking about large scale beach cleanups, people often think it can't be that difficult. You just go to a beach and you clean up the beach. Yes, you can, but what do you do with the debris and the waste afterwards? And so with Azraq being a legal entity, we want to ensure that we're doing everything by the books. And so we need to ensure we arrange for permits to enable us to actually undertake the cleanup to begin with, and then the waste removal permit as well, so that it's disposed of properly and recycled where possible. In terms of actually undertaking the cleanups, at the moment, they're a little bit harder to do because of social distancing regulations, and we're not able to get a permit, particularly in Dubai and Abu Dhabi or Sharjah at the moment because of social distancing.
So that makes sense.
They are allowing groups of 5 people only at the beach as at the moment. So, however, we have got some places that are enabling larger groups to come together and to undertake those activities. Become a member of Azraq. We have a free membership that you can just join if you only want to volunteer, called our Educate membership. If you just go to azraqme.org and go to our Join Us page, you'll find how easy it is to actually just fill out the online form, and our great admin team will look after you after that.
Amazing. Okay, that's good. So, Natalie, what are some of the most common misconceptions people have about marine conservation?
I'm going to come back to the fact that when it comes to marine conservation, a lot of people think normally that it's about oceans, and the common misconception is that it purely is just about marine environment, when it's about people. And this is the thing that we want to raise the awareness of.
Yeah.
The oceans, again, I just want to reiterate this. Every second breath that we take as humans comes from our oceans. And so we need these bodies of water to give us oxygen to survive. And if we don't protect them, then we are impacting humanity. It's not just impacting the marine environment itself.
Right. Okay. So now, undoubtedly, one of the prime reasons we all know the reason why people opt for plastic products is the low price. Do you see that changing in the future? And what do you think would influence that change?
I absolutely do see it changing in the future. We already are starting to see a lot of changes worldwide with bans coming along in terms of single-use plastics. We see a huge amount of awareness about this issue than there used to be even 5 years ago. Without a doubt, the landscape is changing. However, it's not changing quickly enough because of the fact that technology has not caught up to this problem. There is nothing that I'm aware of. We're starting to see bioplastics come into the market, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that is as good when it comes to being easily transportable, cheap, and moldable in order to meet the demands of the public in terms of convenience today. So we have got to the stage where our grandparents would be absolutely shocked, if they aren't already, about how quick we can access items today. When we talk about deliveries to the house. And unfortunately, when we talk about deliveries, it's quick and it's convenient, but it usually comes with plastic.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so there's nothing in the market that really can match the benefits that plastic has. And this is why we have the problem still today.
It's just too convenient.
Absolutely. This issue is only around 75, 80 years that we've had plastics available to us on a mass scale. And if we think about what we've done, because this plastic does not actually break up, it doesn't disappear, it only breaks up. There's now just microplastics everywhere in our soil, in our air, it's everywhere now. And we've done that in 75 years.
Amazing.
It's going to take a long time for us to fix this problem, but technology will help, and that's what will get us over the line.
Yeah, and we created it in such a short time. It's astounding.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So Natalie, on your website, you have a list of wonderful eco-friendly and reusable products as alternatives for everyday products. Are you making these products yourself at Azraq?
Unfortunately, no. I would love to say that we are making them all, but no, we are not. We are actually, though, utilising, where possible, locally made products. So, for example, with COVID-19 hitting the world, we were able to find a local person who makes our masks for us. And so it really is nice to be able to support local people who have those talents that I don't have, and nor do our team, to make those products for us.
That's
so
brilliant.
yeah, wherever we can, we will support local, and that includes also to things like our t-shirts that we purchase locally as well. So just wherever possible. It is hard though, I have to admit, that manufacturing is something that we find is quite on the low scale in the UAE when it comes to products. So sadly, we often find we have to go elsewhere.
Right. So to put this into perspective, could you tell us what difference would it make if someone used a, for example, bamboo toothbrush versus a regular plastic one?
Let's talk about a bamboo straw rather than a regular one.
Okay.
Because this is a story I like to tell all the time, to try and talk about the impacts that people can have. A lot of the time people feel as though the problem is so overwhelming that they don't know how to start, and even if they did, it would only be a tiny blop in the ocean, for example. But if we talk about utilizing a bamboo straw to replace a plastic one, if you were to have only one drink a day that utilized a plastic straw and you replaced it with a bamboo one, you would be saving 365 straws from going either into the ocean or into landfill, because there's no other way to handle with those straws. They cannot be recycled. So you alone are stopping 365. If you were to have 2 drinks a day that utilizes straws, you've now stopped over 700 straws from going into the ocean. If you got your friend to do the same, you've now stopped over 1,400 straws. And so it's a rolling on impact. When we talk about the roll-on impact, I'm going to talk about our Stop Sucking campaign, which is the first campaign that Azraq launched. We launched it initially with Freedom Pizza, who decided that they no longer wanted to provide plastic straws. They then encouraged their peers to do the same thing. So Jumeirah Restaurant Group then came on board. We stopped millions of straws every year in 12 months from being in circulation throughout the UAE as a result of our Stop Sucking campaign. And that's just because one person decided to start a not-for-profit focusing on this issue. So there is no way that anyone can tell me that they are not enough. And this is the problem when it comes to this, and another misconception in terms of marine conservation. Yeah, you are more than enough able to do your impact and to play your role in this. And if 8 billion people all played that same role, we would absolutely reverse this problem.
Absolutely. Amazing. So every single person can contribute, can make an impact, even in a small way. It all adds up.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, it's small steps. And this is the thing that people often don't get. I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. No. What is holding you back is really what the question needs to be. If you're not already doing this, what is holding you back? Why aren't you?
Yeah, I remember we had recently another guest on the show as well, and she said, just make one change a day, or make one change at a time. Don't try and take on the whole world. Take one thing that you can change and that you can stick to. Make that change, and then once you've got that down, then you add something else. So in that way, it's achievable for every single person to add one thing extra that they can do to protect the environment.
Absolutely. And this is where our eco-friendly products come in play, because those products all replace those single-use items. So if you were to buy 1, 2, 3 of those items, for example, you're already playing a role in reducing your impact, plus benefiting a marine conservation organization. They're going to use that money and put it back into the services that we provide.
Right, excellent.
Right. So Natalie, I'm sure that many of our listeners would want to know more about helping or sponsoring Azraq. So for those who are interested in supporting the cause, what are some of the ways they can help or contribute?
Okay, so when it comes to assisting, we will always be asking for time. If you've got time, then we absolutely want to talk to you and you're dedicated to the cause. If you are motivated to do so, then we will find something for you to do, whether it be to get involved in a beach cleanup, whether it be to get involved in something that you already are skilled at, such as you may be an artist. There's ways you can raise the awareness through art. You might be an amateur photographer. We'll find that we just definitely need those skills to help us undertake our operations. We are a grassroots entity, so that means wherever we can find assistance, we're obviously going to grab it and utilize those people. If you don't have time, then you may have funds to provide. And that's a simple email to our team just to say, I would like to sponsor and support your organization financially. As long as you are a UAE resident or a company that is licensed, we are able to accept sponsorship. And it could be, we have had people sponsor 100 dirham, and we will still always give them a thank you, of course, because every type of money assists what we're trying to do, particularly when we've been impacted in our operations through COVID-19. It's been a tough year for small business all round. And so people don't think that they are going to be enough. What they want to give is going to be enough. I can tell you absolutely, again, if I had 50 people all willing to sponsor us a small amount, we'd be much better off than without it. So,
absolutely. Again, every small bit of help
counts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And then there's things like if you don't have time or money, then there may be resources. So we have found with COVID-19, our team are all having to work from home. They don't all have the access that they would normally have to printers, for example. So if you have an old printer at your house that you're not using, we have a wish list on our website where you can see the things that we are calling for. You may have a space in your office that you could have a meeting at. We would want to try and see if we could access that, because costs for venue hire is very expensive for a not-for-profit.
Right.
So those are some really practical things. Yes,
absolutely. So there's lots of ways you can get involved, and if you want to join us as a member of Azraq, as I said previously, just head to our website and we've got an online form that people can complete.
Sure.
Lovely, very good. So sort of in the same vein, with the current climate change and overall global warming issues, and we know what you've explained, all that's going on with the oceans, what advice would you give to our listeners? Some practical ways for them to start to make a change towards a more sustainable and conscious future?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the fact that a lot of the stuff that when we talk about what is impacting or having the biggest impact on our oceans at the moment, cigarette butts is the number one item. So if you are a smoker, it's going to be very good for your health and the health of the environment to try and quit.
Yes, very true.
We were talking before about the straw and the impact you can have on the straw. But if you also are a coffee drinker and you go to a takeaway coffee retail outlet, you can replace your coffee cup with a reusable one, and you are going to stop 365 or over 700 coffee cups from going into the oceans as well, or into landfill.
And that is such an easy replacement, isn't it? It's not that difficult to carry your own mug with you.
These are very small steps. And again, I want to get back to the fact that you can play a role in having a reduction in these plastics. You may just think it's only you, but you tell others about what you're doing, talk about it with others, and see the knock-on effects that take place. For me to sit in my first year of starting a not-for-profit and saying that as a result of me starting this entity, I stopped millions of straws. I never thought I would say that, but you don't know what happens until you start. And don't do it quietly. Make sure you tell other people about what you're doing, because that's where you get the kudos from others, but also to that knock-on effect that we want to see. The other thing that I would say, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, is if something is holding you back and you aren't doing what you already know you need to. So most people, when I talk about the things that we find along the oceans, none of it is new. This is not rocket science. But if something is holding you back, delve in deeper as to what that is and understand why. Is it because you're afraid to fail? And if that's the case, then I need to let people know you cannot be perfect in this space. As was mentioned earlier, if you just take 1, 2, or 3 steps, and that is all you do for the year, that is way better than where you were 3 steps back.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So I'm talking to you on a mobile phone. There is plastic on my mobile phone. So I can't get away from it. In 2020 modern society, there is plastic that we cannot get away from, but if you just do the best that you can, that's all anybody can ask of you, and you still will have an impact.
Sure.
Absolutely. So, Natalie, tell us one of your proudest moments during your journey till now.
So my proudest moment has definitely been when I decided to step away from my day-to-day 9-to-5 role as a media advisor and make that change. It was very difficult. A lot of tears were shed, but it was rewarded when we had celebrities join the campaign about the shark culling. And one of those celebrities was Ricky Gervais, who held up a sign saying no shark cull. In London he was talking about a campaign I worked on in Perth, Western Australia.
Wow.
And I had only a few moments in my life where I've had I call goosebump moments. One of them was my wedding. But when I saw the photo of Ricky Gervais holding up that sign, I had a goosebump moment at that. And I still have goosebumps today talking to you about it. 7 years
amazing.
So I have to say that's probably my most proudest moment. It just made everything, all that fight just seemed so worthwhile. And I hope I have the chance to tell him one day face to face, or even just via communication, where he actually acknowledges how much that actually meant.
That's amazing.
Excellent.
And that when celebrities get behind a cause like this, it certainly helps to raise the awareness that much quicker.
Sure.
Absolutely. Very much so.
So we've spoken about where you've come from and some of the challenges you've gone through. Let's talk a little bit about the plans that you have for Azraq for 2021. Do you have any exciting projects planned?
We absolutely do. We had our team come together, as we always do, at a strategy meeting, and talk about the year ahead, and what the team wanted to achieve. Our team is growing, and it's getting to a stage where it's getting really exciting, where I don't have to think of the ideas myself anymore. And so to get more input from the team is really great. And when you have these chances to have strategy days and bring the team together, it's amazing what come out of these days where great minds come together and just try and nut out some of the issues. We recently launched our coral reef campaign, which is about protecting and conserving the local reefs. And out of that will become reef surveys and monitoring. And that came out of our youth ambassadors. Our youth called for us to do more about protecting coral reefs. So
wow,
that was
excellent.
That was launched in September this year, and we've still got a lot to do. That campaign will probably run for 24 months at least. And we want to ensure that we're going to coral reefs and surveying that coral reef regularly, so at least once a month, so that we can compile data so that we can see any type of impact, whether it be good or bad, that is happening to that particular local reef structure.
What an exciting project.
Yeah,
Let me just ask you about
absolutely.
that real quick. So are you diving and taking video, or how are you recording the coral reef?
Yes, we are diving. So we're utilizing, so as a diving instructor, my skills, but also to the certifying divers and encourage them to come with me to undertake these surveys. We're actually utilizing a methodology that is scientifically proven across the world, to actually a method that is translatable and easily accessed by scientists to provide input. So it's a lot of data collection, photographs, not so much video. It's mainly photographs that you can see the changes over time. We are going to get further into the diving and get involved in the removal of ghost nets, which is abandoned fishing nets that the fishermen have left in the oceans. When they are abandoned, it means that they can capture marine life for the life of that net. Basically, it can be years that net can sit there, just entrapping marine life. So it will stay there until it's removed. And so we're utilizing our divers again for that. So there's going to be a lot more ocean work, and we've got some really exciting improvements to our current campaigns. We want to see an extension of our Magic Mangrove campaign be moved into Abu Dhabi. So at the moment that's focused in Ajman, into Al Zora Nature Reserve there, but we want to see what we can do in Abu Dhabi and then mangroves in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And we've got some exciting stuff to launch for dolphin protection in the UAE as well. So some really exciting stuff to look forward to.
Amazing.
That sounds fantastic. And we're excited to be following you and what all these projects that you are working with. It sounds amazing.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you. I'm constantly motivated by my team, and we're only as strong as the team that we have, and we are very, very fortunate in Azraq to have so much experience and passion in our team. I'm with you in some ways. Before it used to just be me, but now I can sit back a little bit more and actually just watch and be very full of pride for my team.
So lovely.
Amazing. So, Natalie, we have now come to the most interesting segment of our show, which is called the Rapid Fire. It's our version of a game show. So, we'll be
Okay.
asking you a few questions and you have to just respond whatever first thing comes to your mind.
Fine.
Are
Looking
you
forward to
ready?
it. Let's go.
Let's go. So, favorite beach?
I'm going to say Cottesloe in Perth, Western Australia.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. What's your favorite marine animal?
Whale shark.
Of course.
What is the first thing you do in the morning?
Brush my teeth.
Okay. What is your favorite alternative to plastic shopping bags?
A tote bag or a canvas
Okay.
bag.
Okay. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
And can you name one thing on your bucket list?
I wish to go and dive in Mexico.
Ooh, yes, it's beautiful. So thank you so much for playing along.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, we would like to do our green pill moment. So Natalie, what green pill advice would you give to your younger self?
I am definitely going to say that the advice I would give to my younger self would be to learn how to shut off from those people who criticize but aren't in the game. So one of the hardest lessons that I learned throughout my whole activism is turning off to those armchair warriors, like we call them. Those people who aren't really playing a role but criticizing you regardless. I guess I listen, unfortunately, too much to the negative and not enough to the positive. That's how human beings are wired. And it really impacted me for a small moment in my time as an activist where I got to the stage where I lost the positivity and the hope and sort of like questioned myself about why I'm doing what I do. Particularly, I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid to do what I do. So there's a huge enough reason to stop already because there's bills to pay, right? So you don't need the negativity. I mean, you're trying to make a positive change, and so you're hoping at least that people can try and see that what you're doing is for a positive reason. However, a really big learning curve for me at that time was I had a passion for sharks, and I know that sharks are one of those animals that are divisive. People either hate them or they love them, and there's not much middle ground in that space.
Right.
So whilst I was somebody who loved them, there would be no way I could get anybody who hated them to see through my eyes unless they had the opportunity to do what I've done. And I've been fortunate enough to have some amazing experiences diving with sharks, which is why I have a healthy respect for them. But I would definitely say to learn how to shut off from those negative people, and they always are going to be there regardless, and to continue anyway, because knowing that you're on the right side of history is enough for me every day now to get up and do what I do. When somebody throws some mud, if they're not in the fight with me, the mud needs to be diverted and my support system be strong enough to help me get through that day. And so that's what I would say. The lessons there that I've learned, there's a couple of them there, but one of them is definitely to have a strong support network to help you through all of those negative times.
Absolutely.
I love that. I think that is absolutely brilliant advice, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to benefit from that. There's a quote by Guy Kawasaki, and I'm not going to use the words he used, but pretty much he says, if you're not, upsetting someone or some people, you're not doing anything interesting.
Right.
Exactly. You're not doing your job right. I have heard something similar. Yes. You've got to upset someone.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing your wonderful and inspiring story and for that fantastic advice. I'm so sure our listeners are going to enjoy this conversation as much as we have. And we wish you and Azraq everything of the best, and we will definitely be following your story.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I really, truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Natalie. And before we say our goodbyes, could you share with us where people could find more information about Azraq? Any social media handles?
Absolutely. So our website is Azraq, AZRAQ, ME for Middle East.org, AzraqME.org. And as our handles are, it's Azraq ME, all of them: Instagram, Azraq ME, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we also are on YouTube, Azraq ME.
Great. We'll
Fantastic.
also add these to our show notes. So thank you again for joining us today, and we wish you and Azraq all the very best, Natalie.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.